Welcome to the Budget Forum. I am Sammy Chin from Phoenix TV. Mr. Portia and the Financial Secretary delivered the second budget of this government this morning. After the press conference in the afternoon, he's here this evening to give us further detail about the budget. He will also answer questions from the media. Welcome. Good evening, everyone. Hello, Sammy. This forum is jointly organized by 5 TV stations. Let me introduce the panelists. From Cable TV, Charlie Hong. From TMHK, Fong Ka Li. From Now TV, Valerie Hui. From TVB, Conrad Lau. FS, the floor is yours. Good evening, everyone. After the epidemic, Hong Kong economy revived. There was economic growth of 3.2% in the whole year. Export of goods, because of external slackened external demand as well as external environment, geographical, political situations, there was a drop by 10%. But there was an 30 million visitors coming to Hong Kong, so services increased by 21%. Consumption was the main drive of our economic recovery. There was also a rebound of investment by about 10%. Looking forward to in 2024, the external environment is still complicated. There is still uncertainty in the geopolitical situation. Interest rate is still high, so we think that export will still be under pressure. The economic growth this year will be about 2.5 to 3.5%. In the short term, we have to leverage on the tourism industry to bring in more inbound visitors to drive other economic segments so that local consumption, retail, and other segments will benefit. At the same time, we will build the Hong Kong brand. In the medium and long term, we will go on all out to attract enterprises, talent, and capital so that the economic pie will be enlarged, thereby increasing people's income. FS, I think one of the focus today is the cooling measures or the scrape of them. These measures have been in place for about a decade. In some areas in Hong Kong, some of the offer of flats ask for a higher price. A number of large companies and some scholars foretold before this morning that even with the scraping of the measures, there might be a spike in number of transactions, but still property prices will remain low. With the cancelling of these measures, developers may increase the supply of units. Are you concerned that prices will continue to drop? At the time when these cooling measures were introduced, it was a time when there was an over-demand. That's why property prices spiked within a very short time. There was an imbalance of demand and supply there. That's why we introduced the demand-side management measures to curb speculative activities in a gradual manner. And we also wanted to accord priority to Hong Kong residents in the purchase of properties over other groups. But over the years, the market for residential units has changed. We have about 20,000 unsold units. There are also about 20 to 30 off-plan flats. In the coming 3 to 4 years, there are about 109,000 residential units. So there is going to be a balance between demand and supply. The government is going to do something given the fact that there is going to be an equilibrium. This is a good time to cancel the cooling measures for the normal operation of the market. we expect that after the cancellation of these measures, we can guide market sentiment. In other words, we can move away from the pessimistic market sentiment. We see that there is going to be a healthy development in our property market. In terms of real estate stocks, there was a rise in stock prices. They think that you responded to their aspirations. How come that in the budget there was no mention about assistance to people who are going to buy their first flat? We asked the Hong Kong Monetary Authority to conduct a review. In fact, it is going to be a relaxation of the loan-to-mortgage ratio. Say, for example, those that is over 10 million, the mortgage can be as high as 90%. And so it is easier to buy a property. In terms of the government's housing policy, in the coming few years, the supply of subsidized sales flat will increase. But it takes time to create land and to build units. The supply may not materialize within a short time. But what we can see is that for supply of housing, whether it is public rental housing or subsidized sale flat, will reach the target or even exceed the targets. Now we have a stable and sufficient supply. Interest hike has reached its peak. So the macro-prudential measures will be removed. This is the chance for members of the public to take time, take into account their own affordability before they make a decision. Now we hear from Fong Ka-li from RTHK. Good evening, FS. You have cancelled all the cooling measures. The FS said that you don't want the pessimistic sentiment to magnify, but there is a negative equity problem. So there is a pessimistic sentiment for the stock market for quite some time. We see some medium to long-term measures. Would that be short-term measures? Would you consider reducing the stock stamp duty? The stock transaction stamp duty has no direct correlation with the performance of the stock market. We have considered the market performance after we have made the last adjustments in the stamp duty. There are many factors affecting liquidity. Transaction cost is one, and out of the transaction cost, stamp duty is one. Other than that, there are other costs. That's why in the budget, you see that we will enhance the liquidity by implementing the recommendation of the task force on enhancing stock market liquidity, including narrowing the spread, reducing transaction cost, attracting quality enterprises to come to Hong Kong, attracting quality capital from the Middle East and other places to reinvigorate our market. It's better to do it with a basket of factors. Well, there are many factors affecting the short-term performance of the stock market. We need to focus on enhancing the quality of the market. When market sentiment returns to normal, you will see a different landscape. I've been to Davos for an international conference. I spoke to some fund managers. They said that the valuation of Hong Kong stocks was actually a bargain. For some companies, they are considering allocating asset in our market. What they don't want to see is that when there is a rebound of prices after readjustments, fund companies missed the chance. So we need to introduce appropriate adjustments. I think that the stock market is going to do well. So for the stock market, it takes time for it to be revived. They can't do what is happening to the property market, that is with a short-term boost. The stock market is greatly affected by the flow of capital. For some time, it was heavily affected by geopolitical situation. It's also related to the economic performance of the mainland. So that is very different from the property market. Our assessment and our approach will be different, will be more targeted. I'm sure there will be other topics. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Budget Forum. We have Valerie Ho from Now TV. Financial Secretary, it's been 2 years in a row that we see a fiscal deficit of over $100 billion. There are sayings that you have been making a false estimation of the fiscal deficit. Well, for year 2023-24, the fiscal deficit is about $106 billion. Compared to my estimation of last year, it's $50 billion more. Well, last year, the equity market was sluggish, and therefore we saw a plunge in revenue from land sale, and also we have a drop of revenue from stamp duty. And this has to do with the geopolitical situation because it affects the capital flow. Overall speaking, last year, the estimated economic growth was 2.5 to 3.5%. So our estimation is very close. And the inflation rate as well as the projected unemployment rate are also close. You estimate that there will be $48 billion of fiscal deficit, and you estimate that the revenue from land sale will be about over 10%, and there will be an increase of 40% of revenue from stamp duty. Do you think you can boost public confidence? Well, the theme of this year's budget is advance with confidence, seize opportunities, and strive for high-quality development. In the budget, I proposed some measures to stabilize the confidence of the market. This includes the lifting of market cooling measures as well as measures targeting the stock market. We want to drive economic growth. In the short run, we want to leverage our cutting-edge in tourism industry, and we also want to attract businesses. So far, we have attracted some 40 enterprises. In total, they have invested $40 billion, and they will together create about 13,000 jobs. We are very confident with the economy of Hong Kong. We have the Top Talent Pass scheme as well as other talent attraction schemes. They are very popular. For the Top Talent Pass scheme, we have done some questionnaire surveys. We managed to attract young talents. Some of them are married, and some of them brought families. Over 50% of them are employed with median monthly income of about $50,000. With all these new drives, and at the same time, we're trying to attract capital from the Middle East and also from the mainland. We think that while we try to drive growth, we should attract enterprises, capital, as well as talent. Now we have Mr. Charlie Hong from Cable TV. Financial Secretary, we are all concerned about the lifting of all property market cooling measures. You have mentioned that the demand and supply situation has improved. My question is, last month, the administration was saying that there was a drop of home prices. Well, it's been a month now, and you have lifted all property market cooling measures. And less than half a year ago, the policy address announced the scrapping of some cooling measures. What made you decide that you should remove all cooling measures on the property market? We have been paying close attention to the property market. We see that in our property market, in September 2021, we saw a peak, and around the end of last year, there was also a drop in home prices, and transaction volume was at a low level. Last year, the transaction volume was about 43,000. If you look at the situation from 2013 onwards, apart from last year and the year before, the transaction is about 60,000. In other words, we are seeing a stable supply and demand situation in the market, and also we're seeing the interest rates, high interest rates, and with unstable geopolitical situation, people are hesitant when they purchase properties. And we believe that starting from the second half of this year, we will see a stable interest rate. So we've decided to cancel the demand-side management measures. While the market has resumed normal, we find these measures unnecessary. And we are going to resume the mortgage rules, and the loan-to-value ratio can be up to 70%. For people who would like to purchase homes or rent an apartment, they can think about it. And the home prices in Hong Kong have all along been high. Apart from the private market, the SAR government has rolled out different subsidized housing schemes to meet the demand. So we've seen measures on different fronts. Mr. Sha Bao-long, Director of Hong Kong and Macau Affairs, have met with some real estate developers. Did he give you some tips on the budget, or did he give directives on what to do with the property market? Well, Mr. Shah came to Hong Kong mainly to learn about the economic situation in Hong Kong, as well as the administration and governance. He met with some of the government officials, and he listened to our views and reports about the economic and financial situation in Hong Kong. Well, under one country, two systems, the budget is the mission of the SAR government, and it is our team under the leadership of the chief executive that we tried our best to cope with the situation we are facing in Hong Kong, and we make the decision that we think are most suitable. I'm from TVB. In the budget, you mentioned that excluding the issuance of bonds, we will be able to resume the economic level in 2028 and 2029. Does that mean in the coming 4 years we will see a fiscal deficit? Some scholars say that this is a structural deficit that we're facing. What are your views on this? Well, over the past few years, we had the COVID pandemic, and therefore we had high expenditure. So there were a few years where we saw fiscal deficits. In this current term government, during the first year, we compressed the expenditure by 10%. We have to ensure a balance between expenditure and revenue. We can't do it overnight. To increase revenue, we have to take into consideration our competitiveness. At the same time, we have to consider the affordability of our citizens. We don't want to increase the burden of our people. So there is little room that we can broaden the source of revenue. So we try to slash expenditures. The SAR government tries to cut down on expenditure by 1% every year, and on capital works expenditure, we try to control it within $90 billion a year. So we are trying to narrow the deficit progressively. By year 2027-28, we'll be able to see a surplus. By narrowing the deficit, on one hand, we'll be able to maintain economic growth and drive, and on the other hand, we won't be able to exert burden on our citizens. How did you come up with all these figures? Why did you think that by 2027 and 28 we'll be able to see a surplus? We are seeing plenty of revenue from exchange fund. Do you make a calculation based on the revenue from the exchange fund? Also, would you consider broadening the tax base or reforming the tax regime to ensure that we will see a surplus by year 2027 and 28? Investment income was high in 2024-25 because we made money in 2021. And in the coming few years, every year, we'll see $300 million or $400 million of revenue, be it operating expenditure or works expenditure. We're going to control them to a certain level. We are going to do it in a progressive manner. You see that for our expenditure for year 2024-25, it accounts for 24% of our GDP, and 5 years later, we will be able to control it to about 22% of our GDP. And the revenue, it's currently account for 20% of our GDP, and 5 years later, we'll go up to 22%. So we will see a drop of 24% to 20%, and from 20% to 22% for the revenue. And we will continue to narrow the deficit. We will take 2 to 3 years' time to do that. Then we won't have to, in the short run, increase revenue and exert burden on our citizens. We are also trying to cut back on spending in a progressive manner. Let's have a break now.
Welcome back to the Budget Forum. FS, to follow up on the previous topic, we're all very concerned about the deficit. My question is, well, there is a drop of government revenue. That's why in the coming 5 years, the government will increase the volume of bond issuance. Is it going to be a standing policy to alleviate pressure on the public coffer? We want to, through issuance of bonds, to promote and implement projects such as the Hongshui-Q new development area, as well as the Northern Metropolis. For taxes like salaries tax and profits tax, you see that it's been on the increase from year to year. In 23-24, it's a different time. Land sale will, we believe, become stable. So issuance of bond is not to support regular expenditure. They are for specific purpose, such as the Northern Metropolis and the Hongshui-Q new development area, as well as other projects. From bond issuance, it gives rise to two other topics. First, is it a good time? Two, you have floated a figure, that is the debt to GDP ratio, 9 to 13%. That is the range for every year. If we compare ourselves with other advanced economies, is it unfair? Because the scale of these other economies is much bigger, so we can't compare ourselves with these economies. The timing of bond issuance has to be right. We consider the trend of interest rates, whether other institutions will issue bonds to crowd the market. We want to ensure that there is sufficient maneuver room and flexibility before we decide to issue bonds. There are some retail bonds that are quite popular. We think that we can make use of these popular bonds to provide an option for members of the public to invest with these reliable bond purchase. And this is also a different type of investment. We compare our debt to our GDP. When we compare ourselves with other economies, yes, they may have a sizable debt, but at the same time, the economy is bigger as well. So it's a comparable comparison. We have sound finances to increase the issuance if necessary. But for our government, the money from bond issuance is to invest for the future on different capital projects, not for paying government expenditure. Fong Kali, let's turn to livelihood issues. Every year, people wait for the budget. They are very concerned about whether there will be sweetness and whether people will benefit from it. This time they realize that the size of the sweet is a lot smaller. Relief measures is reduced to about $11.5 billion. In the press conference, well, you apologize to the middle class, saying that the tax rebate has shrunk. This time round in the budget, there is no consumption voucher, no tariff subsidy, and there is a chance that the transport subsidy may not continue. There are a lot of review of fees relating to livelihood issues as well. Doesn't mean that the burden on the general public is heavier. Yes, in the past few years, there was a sizable relief measures put in place because it was an economic downturn. Last year, the economic growth was 3.2%. This year, we think it's going to be 2.5 to 3.5, and our economy is going to grow in the coming few years. Currently, the unemployment rate is only 2.9%. Inflation is stable, standing at about 1.7%. Everything is quite stable. It's easy to find a job. From the Census and Statistics Department survey, we find that there is an increase in real-term income. So the situation is different from a few years ago. That's why the magnitude of anti-cyclical measures is different. Don't forget that we have to take into account affordability of the public coffer. Over a number of years, there is a drop in our reserve from 1.1 trillion to $730 billion. So we need to make sure that we have the resources and the funding to carry on with work in other areas. That's why I apologize that we have to dial back the relief measures to ensure that we have the resources to continue to provide necessary public service so that we can continue to work together to enlarge the economic pie. The most important thing is that if the economic pie gets bigger, then people will find it easier to find jobs and they will earn more. That is the best way to benefit the public. Another question for the FS. A lot of people from the retail sector and the F&B sector said that their businesses are seriously affected by people going to the mainland to spend. So elderly people can just use the $2 to travel and then they go to the mainland to spend. So when you review the $2 scheme, will you consider the fact that people are going to the mainland? Will you stop the concessionary fares for crossing the border to reduce the number of people going to the mainland to spend? We will continue with the transport concessionary schemes. But with an aging population, the expenditure in this regard is increasing significantly. In the long term, it will be difficult for the public for the government to afford it. That is completely separated from people spending on the mainland. There is a change in consumption behavior of the public. We think that we need to do something different, something more in Hong Kong. We have to do more in terms of our tourism, our leisure and recreation activities, so that visitors, local ones or not, will have different places to go. In the budget, we mentioned about drone shows, pyrotechnic shows. What we want to do is to combine these with other mega events so that retailers, restaurants can all work together, say for example by launching special deals to keep people in Hong Kong, to give them a better experience. When everyone's happy, of course, they will spend more. This in turn will drive businesses for retail business and the F&B business. I think this is a better approach. Valerie Hui, I want to ask about the tax regime. You propose resumption of the hotel accommodation tax, but it's criticized that it's rather tedious and it's something very old. So will you consider having new types of taxes? Because the accounting sector has been asking for this for a number of years. You've been saying that you will look into it. When will you take actual action? Yes, we used to charge hotel accommodation tax. Looking around us in nearby cities and other places, it's charged. It's charged under different names, maybe value-added tax or services, goods and services tax or hotel accommodation tax. For a number of years, it has generated sizable income for us. When an inbound visitor comes to Hong Kong, according to the Tourism Board, they spend $6,000 to $7,000, out of which $2,000 is on accommodation. So 3% is about $60, about $60. So the expenditure would increase by less than 1%, is minimal. If we levy new taxes, there should be discussion in society. And we can't just consider ourselves. We have to compare ourselves with nearby areas to make sure that our tax regime is competitive enough so that we have an advantage when we attract talents. And we're renowned for our simple low tax regime. So when it comes to increasing source of income, we are targeted. We only want to ask for those who are affordable to pay more. So when it comes to affordable users pay, if you earn more, you pay higher tax. Is it contrary to your policy to attract talents? We have done the maths. We have also done the comparison with other big cities. If you earn over $5 million, we charge 16% in standard rates. We are still very competitive compared to other places. For high-income earners, for those that we want to attract, this is not going to be a hurdle. We have to be confident about our advantages. Our tax regime is competitive. We are a metropolis. We have a very colorful life. Hong Kong is very pluralistic and diversified. We have country park, we have cultural facilities. So Hong Kong is very attractive, especially to overseas people. Let's take a break.
Welcome back to the last part of the budget forum. Charlie Home from Cable. I'd like to ask about last land sale. There will be 8 plots of land for sale compared to last year. There were 12. So there will be a supply of 15,000 residential units compared to the estimated 20,000 units last year. We see a drop. Do we have enough supply? Ms. Winnie Ho, Secretary for Housing, said that there's no government land rolled out this year. Do you think that it is because the market cannot digest it? We have a target in terms of land sale. According to the long-term strategy, we have to produce about 13,000 private housing units. So the 15,000 units exceeds our target. This is the first point. Secondly, in the past, for government land sale, we can put land up for sale anytime we want. We don't have to stick to the schedule necessarily. The market has been quiet recently. This quarter, we didn't roll out any land for sale, but we continue to work on our land, and we have enough land reserve to cope with the market situation, and we can put land up for sale anytime we want. We think the schedule that we are looking at is suitable. Do you think the market has the appetite to digest the supply? Do you have to observe the sentiment of the market and cease putting up land for sale? Well, we're seeing a rapidly changing market. We will continue to pay attention to the market. In the budget, I mentioned that there will be some cooling measures. There will be easing of requirements for property loans. We will pay attention to the interest rate, and we will also look at the economic situation. We will, based on the market, decide how much land we will put up for sale and where the land should be located. Financial Secretary, let's turn to another topic. There was mentioning that there are fewer sweeteners for the grassroots and that we will see a fiscal deficit for the coming few years. Will the principal government officials be able to do something? Will they be able to bear a pay cut or pay freeze given the economic downturn? Just now at the press conference, you mentioned that the salary for principal officials do not account for a large sum of money, but we can look at a pay cut for all civil servants. Have you thought about that? Last year, we saw an economic growth of 3.2%. This year, we project an economic growth of 2.5 to 3.5%. Coming up, the economy will continue to revive. The SAR government has been attracting capital, talents, as well as enterprises, and we are seeing good progress in this regard. So we are optimistic about the economic outlook. Apart from our own efforts, we get the support from our motherland. According to our judgment, we think the economy in the mainland will stabilize. In our view, well, the salary of principal officials compared to the overall expenditure of the government, it accounts for a sum of money. Well, we are seeing an improving economic outlook. We don't want our policies to affect the private market, be it principal officials or normal civil servants. Our salary affects that of the private sector. We have talked to the principal officials. We want to grow the economic pie, and we want all wage earners to excel. We want to increase the income of everyone in Hong Kong to drive economic growth of the city. So there won't be a pay cut or pay freeze for principal officials. In your blog, you mentioned that you would like to adhere to an affordable users pay principle. And there was talks that public service charges will be adjusted. However, we're not seeing adjustment of these fees. Will you end up still raising the public service fees? It's just that you're not including it in this year's budget, and so not to provoke our citizens. Well, for public service charges, we are seeing multiple types of these fees, and we have been doing periodical review. Over the past 2 years, we have reviewed and adjusted some public charges. So there is an existing mechanism for the review, and we think that it's right for us to stick to that mechanism. At the same time, while we adjust different types of fees, we take into account the inflation rate, and that's one of the factors that we consider. We don't expect to adjust all fees in one go. We have to consider the affordability of businesses as well as general citizens. For instance, since 1994, we've just seen an increase of $200. That is 10% of the business registration fees. And that's way below the inflation rate. At the same time, we're seeing that the insolvency and protection fund, where there is tens of billions of dollars of balance. And we are going to have the business registration levy of $150 to be waived for 2 years. So while we adjust the fees and tax items, we'll consider the implications on SMEs and the general public. You mentioned that our economy will continue to revive. We look at Japan and the UK. They have entered into a technical recession. Do you have your concerns in this regard? Well, we make our own judgment. We look at a few factors. Hong Kong is a small and externally open economy. We see free movement of goods as well as flow of capital. In the international level, we look at the US and Europe. We look at their economy. At the same time, we also look at the economic development of the mainland. We also look at ourselves. For instance, we look at the performance of the equity market in Hong Kong. For instance, in the US, the economic growth is lower than last year, but still is a positive growth. If you look at the interest rate, well, while it's uncertain whether it will lower interest rates, but according to market judgments, the interest rate will drop progressively. And in the mainland, with an adjustment of the economic market, our judgment is that it's going to be stable while progressing gradually. In Asia, especially Southeast Asia and Middle East, we're seeing rapid economic growth and development. So the closest partners we have for investment and trade, we are seeing positive growth. That's why we are also optimistic about the economic growth in Hong Kong. Also, we have been attracting enterprises, capital, and talent. We are rolling out appropriate measures to pull together the money and capital to ensure economic growth. In your budget, you mentioned that in the long run, the way of economic growth should be adjusted, and that the quality and quantity should also be considered for enhancements. Does that mean we should not indulge in our past glory? Well, we are seeing a transformation of our economic growth. Over the past few years, we are trying to nurture growth of the INT sector. We want a vibrant ecosystem in the INT sector. We want INT enterprises, including startups, as well as tech giants, as well as enterprises engaging in new industrialization to establish presence in Hong Kong. With technology and talent, we'll be able to drive our economic growth. This is what I mentioned about a change in quality and quantity. In the future, finance as well as INT will be the major dual engines for our growth, and we will also strive for development for the 8 centers. Thank you. Thank you, Financial Secretary, as well as the members of the press. Thank you.